The unforgiving arrival of Typhoon Ragasa. The morning skies above Taiwan had looked deceptively calm, as if nature itself were holding its breath. Yet, deep in the western Pacific Ocean, a monstrous force was swirling closer, its name, Ragasa. A typhoon of unusual strength, Ragasa had built its fury over the course of a week, gathering heat and energy from the ocean's warm waters, stretching its spiraling arms until they reached hundreds of kilometers across. By the time Ragasa roared toward Taiwan, meteorologists had already sounded alarm bells. The Central Weather Bureau issued warnings of torrential rains, surging tides, and violent winds that could tear down anything unprepared. Still, the full brutality of Ragasa would catch many off guard. The first strike, Taiwan under siege. On the eve of landfall, winds howled like a chorus of banshees. Trees bent violently under invisible whips, streetlights flickered and then went dark one by one, leaving entire districts shrouded in darkness. By midnight, Ragasa had fully embraced Taiwan's eastern shores. Reports flooded in. In Yilan County, a residential block collapsed after the riverbanks overflowed, drowning homes in waist-deep water within minutes. In Taipei, emergency sirens blared as rescue workers scrambled to evacuate stranded families. One particularly harrowing account came from a fisherman named Mr. Hulong, who watched helplessly as the sea swallowed his boat, the pride of his family for 3 generations. "We tied it down, prayed it would survive," he recalled later, his voice breaking. "But the waves, they were bigger than houses. It was gone before I could even blink." By sunrise, Taiwan's government confirmed the worst. 14 lives had been lost. Dozens more were missing. Some were swept away by flash floods, others crushed under landslides triggered by hours of relentless rainfall. The island, known for its resilience against storms, was now mourning. Powerless and paralyzed, as Ragasa pressed westward, Taiwan's power grid collapsed under the strain. Over 1.5 million households were left without electricity. Entire hospitals relied on backup generators to keep life support machines running. Families huddled together in candle-lit rooms, clutching radios as their only lifeline to the outside world. Transport systems came to a standstill. Trains were cancelled, highways blocked by fallen trees, and flights grounded indefinitely. Emergency shelters, hastily prepared in schools and gymnasiums, overflowed as evacuees poured in, carrying whatever belongings they could salvage. For many survivors, the most haunting sound was not the roar of the winds or the crashing waves, it was the silence that followed. Streets once bustling with life now lay deserted, submerged under brown waters or littered with debris, marching toward South China. But Ragasa was far from done. After battering Taiwan, the typhoon barreled westward, its winds still howling at over 170 kilometers per hour. Its next target, the coastal provinces of South China. By the time Ragasa's outer bands reached Guangdong and Fujian, authorities had already evacuated nearly 1 million people. Television broadcasts showed images of military trucks carrying families inland, while helicopters ferried the injured from remote villages. Yet despite preparation, nature's wrath proved overwhelming. Guangdong's coastal towns braced themselves as massive storm surges swallowed seawalls and flooded streets. In Zhuhai, waves as tall as 4-story buildings hammered the coastline, ripping apart fishing piers. Guangzhou, though inland, faced record-breaking rainfall that paralyzed its metro system and submerged major highways. It was like the ocean had moved into the city, one resident described. "The water rose so fast. We had no time to run. We climbed onto our roof and prayed." The global spotlight. Ragasa's devastation quickly drew global attention. International media flashed grim images across screens. Families stranded on rooftops, soldiers wading chest-deep through floods carrying children, and volunteers forming human chains to rescue the elderly. Governments abroad sent condolences and offered aid. The United Nations issued a statement calling Ragasa a stark reminder of the climate crisis intensifying storms across the Pacific. Meteorologists confirmed that Ragasa's sheer strength, comparable to a Category 5 hurricane, was fueled by unusually warm ocean temperatures, a phenomenon linked to global warming. The human cost. Yet beyond the numbers and headlines lay the personal tragedies. In Kaohsiung, a schoolteacher named Mei Lin searched desperately for her missing parents after their home was buried in a landslide. In Xiamen, a mother clutched her infant as both were rescued from a submerged bus, her tears mixing with the rain. In rural Fujian, villagers mourned the loss of their crops, their year's harvest destroyed in a single night. For many survivors, the psychological scars would last far longer than the storm itself. The sound of howling winds would haunt their sleep, and the memory of watching neighbors swept away would linger like a shadow. Heroes amid the chaos. Still, amidst the destruction, stories of courage emerged. Volunteers in Taiwan formed rescue brigades, guiding stranded families to higher ground. In Guangdong, firefighters worked around the clock, risking their lives to cut through collapsed buildings and free survivors. Doctors and nurses labored tirelessly in overcrowded hospitals, treating injuries under candlelight when generators faltered. One viral video showed a group of Chinese soldiers linking arms against the current to rescue a grandmother and her grandson trapped in floodwaters. Another captured Taiwanese rescue dogs sniffing through rubble, refusing to give up even as exhaustion set in. These moments of humanity reminded the world that even in the face of overwhelming disaster, resilience could shine through. The aftermath and lingering questions. By the time Ragasa began to weaken inland, its trail of destruction stretched across thousands of kilometers. Taiwan mourned its dead, South China counted its losses, and the world braced itself for the economic ripple effects, disrupted supply chains, damaged ports, and billions in losses. But the deeper question lingered: was Ragasa a freak event, or a grim preview of storms to come? Scientists warned that as oceans continue to warm, storms like Ragasa may become more frequent, more intense, and more destructive. For those who lived through Ragasa, however, the question was far more personal. Could they rebuild their homes? Could they find closure for lost loved ones? Could life ever return to normal? Closing note for Episode 1. The story of Typhoon Ragasa is not just about winds and waves, it is about people. About fishermen who lost their livelihood, children who lost their parents, and nations forced to confront the limits of human preparation against nature's fury. And as Taiwan and South China pick through the wreckage, one truth echoes louder than the storm itself: Ragasa has left scars that will take years to heal. Picking up the pieces after Typhoon Ragasa. The storm had passed, but its silence was not comforting. In the wake of Typhoon Ragasa, Taiwan and South China stood amid devastation that was almost impossible to comprehend. Entire towns had been flattened, bridges torn apart, and livelihoods swept away overnight. For millions of people, survival was no longer about outrunning the typhoon, it was about rebuilding their lives from the rubble. Taiwan's long road to recovery. In Taiwan, the government moved quickly to respond. President Lai addressed the nation, his voice heavy with grief. "We mourn the lives lost," he declared. "But we also stand together as one people. We will rebuild, and we will not let Ragasa break our spirit." His words were broadcast on battery-powered radios across the island, reaching even the most remote shelters. But words alone could not heal wounds. Entire villages had been erased by mudslides. Families slept on mats in overcrowded gymnasiums. Children cried for missing parents, and many elderly survivors remained in shock, staring blankly at walls that no longer existed. Relief workers distributed bottled water, instant noodles, and blankets. International organizations sent crates of medical supplies. Yet, shortages plagued the island. Clean water became scarce, and fears of disease outbreaks grew. Doctors warned of potential cholera and dengue cases in flooded areas, adding another layer of urgency to an already dire situation. The South China struggle. Across the Taiwan Strait, South China was facing its own crisis. Guangdong and Fujian provinces bore the brunt of Ragasa's fury. Coastal fishing towns were reduced to ghostly skeletons of shattered piers and broken boats. Rice fields lay underwater, turning once fertile lands into brown, stagnant lakes. In Guangdong's capital, Guangzhou, residents tried to navigate knee-deep water that lingered for days after the storm. The city's metro remained partially shut, forcing workers to wade through streets to find buses that rarely arrived. For many, daily life had ground to a halt. The Chinese government declared a state of emergency, deploying thousands of soldiers to clear debris, restore electricity, and provide food. Helicopters flew non-stop missions, dropping aid into areas cut off by collapsed roads. Still, critics voiced frustration. The rescue is too slow, one villager in Fujian told reporters. We have no food, no medicine. Only promises. Survivors, voices. Among the survivors were countless untold stories of courage and despair. In Kaohsiung, Taiwan, a teenage boy named Wei helped pull two elderly neighbors from floodwaters using nothing but a rope tied around his waist. I was scared, he admitted later, but I knew if I didn't go, they would die. In Zhuhai, China, a mother named Li Feng described the night the waves crashed into her home. The water rose above our windows, she recalled, holding her young daughter close. I climbed onto the roof and shouted for help. I thought it would be our last night alive. There were stories of heartbreak, too. In Yilan, a rescue team discovered the bodies of a family of 4 buried under a landslide. In Fujian, farmers returned to their land only to find their crops destroyed, their year's income gone. The human toll was not just measured in lives lost, but in futures erased. The economic fallout. Beyond the immediate destruction, Ragasa left a deep economic scar. Taiwan's tech sector, the backbone of its economy, reported disruptions as factories shut down due to power outages and damaged infrastructure. Shipments of semiconductors were delayed, causing ripples in global supply chains. In South China, ports in Guangzhou and Xiamen closed for days, delaying exports and costing billions in trade. Fishing industries collapsed in coastal villages, leaving thousands without income. Economists estimated that the combined losses in Taiwan and South China could exceed $25 billion, a staggering figure that highlighted the storm's global consequences. International response. The world watched closely, and aid began to pour in. The United States pledged $10 million in immediate relief supplies, including portable water purification systems. Japan sent specialized search and rescue teams, a gesture of solidarity for its regional neighbor. The European Union organized a shipment of vaccines to prevent disease outbreaks in shelters. At the United Nations, leaders spoke about the disaster as a warning for the planet. Ragasa is not an isolated tragedy, the Secretary General declared. It is a symptom of the escalating climate crisis. Stronger, deadlier storms are the new reality. We must act. Climate crisis debate. Indeed, the debate over climate change intensified. Scientists pointed out that Ragasa's unprecedented intensity was fueled by record high sea surface temperatures in the western Pacific. Warmer waters meant stronger storms, with more rainfall and destructive surges. In Taiwan, activists urged the government to invest more heavily in renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure. In China, the disaster became a rallying point for discussions about urban planning and coastal defense systems. Across Asia, the message was clear. Ragasa was not just a storm, it was a glimpse into a turbulent future. Political tensions in the midst of tragedy. Yet, even in tragedy, politics loomed. Some commentators accused Taiwan's government of downplaying early warnings, suggesting that more lives could have been saved with faster evacuations. In China, social media lit up with complaints about uneven rescue efforts, with rural villages allegedly receiving less attention than major cities. Still, there were moments of unexpected unity. Chinese and Taiwanese rescue workers exchanged information across unofficial channels, focusing on saving lives rather than fueling disputes. For ordinary people caught in the storm, politics mattered little compared to survival. The human spirit. Amid the wreckage, resilience shone through. In Taiwan, volunteers organized communal kitchens in shelters, cooking warm meals for strangers. In Guangzhou, young people used inflatable rafts to deliver food to stranded families. In Fujian, neighbors pooled money to rebuild a collapsed school. These are the moments that remind us we are stronger together, said one Red Cross worker. Ragasa took much from us, but it did not take away our humanity. Rebuilding for the future. As days turned to weeks, the focus shifted from rescue to recovery. Governments pledged billions for reconstruction. Engineers began designing stronger seawalls and flood-resistant housing. Urban planners in both Taiwan and China considered relocating vulnerable communities away from flood-prone areas. Still, Rebuilding would take years. The emotional scars would last even longer. Psychologists reported rising cases of post-traumatic stress, particularly among children. Every time it rains, my daughter hides under the bed, Li Feng confessed. She thinks Ragasa is coming back. A world forever changed. The legacy of Typhoon Ragasa will not be measured only in statistics or economic losses. It will be remembered in the faces of survivors, the silence of those who did not survive, and the lessons it forced upon nations. For Taiwan, it was a reminder of the island's vulnerability, and the need to prepare for storms of increasing ferocity. For China, it was a test of its emergency response capabilities, and a wake-up call to the dangers of climate-fueled disasters. For the world, it was one more chapter in the growing story of a planet under siege by its changing climate. As survivors rebuild, as governments debate policies, and as scientists warn of what lies ahead, one truth remains: Ragasa has carved its name into history not just as a deadly typhoon, but as a turning point. It forced people to confront the fragility of life, the urgency of climate action, and the strength of the human spirit when tested beyond its limits. The story of Ragasa does not end with the storm's passing. It continues in every brick laid during reconstruction, in every family reunited, and in every voice demanding that the world do better before the next Ragasa arrives.